My name is Elena Cartwright, and I'm 34 years old. If you had asked me 6 months ago to describe my life, I would have said it was steady, not glamorous, not tragic, just solid in a way that made sense to me. I worked as a software architect for a mid-sized tech company, made a decent but unremarkable salary, and lived in a one-bedroom apartment with a dishwasher that kicked on automatically at 12:01 a.m. to catch off-peak power rates. Peak. Every Sunday at 5 p.m., my budget spreadsheet updated itself. Color-coded formulas, locked projections tucked neatly into hidden tabs. That sheet was my ballast. As long as it balanced, I felt like my life did too. What almost no one really understood, not my coworkers, not even my closest friends, was that the real backbone of my future wasn't my day job. It was the thing I'd been quietly building at night. And on weekends, for 6 years, a SaaS platform. That started as a hobby, a wouldn't it be nice if kind of project, and slowly grew teeth. By the time everything went sideways, that little side project was generating nearly $400,000 a year in revenue. Bonzi with minimal overhead. I reinvested relentlessly. No flashy withdrawals, no luxury car, just code servers and a stack of boring, carefully labeled folders in my cloud drive. Taxes, contracts, acquisition inquiries. If you'd met me at a party, you would not have guessed that part. You might have noticed my fiancé, though. His name is Liam, and he has the kind of presence that naturally pulls a room's attention without him even trying. High-energy charming, funny. In that way that doesn't feel like a performance. He works in pharmaceutical sales. Big territory, big bonuses, big numbers. He's proud to rattle off over drinks. We met at a friend's wedding when I was 32 and he was 30. I'd been hiding near the bar after enduring 2 full songs worth of, "So, when is it your turn?" from well-meaning relatives. Liam appeared beside me with a half smile, and a tie loosened just enough to signal he was done pretending to be formal. "Last glass of champagne," he said, holding it out. "You want it." I laughed. "I don't usually take drinks from strangers." "I'm Liam," he said. "Now I'm only half a stranger, plus I saw you stash a lighter in your clutch. I might need that later, when I remember I smoke when I'm stressed." Somehow, I ended up with the champagne. He ended up with my number, and within 3 months, half his wardrobe lived in my closet. We fell into an easy rhythm. Weeknight takeout, Sunday morning grocery runs, his arm thrown lazily around my shoulders on the couch, while I debugged code and he answered work emails. He'd talk about his sales numbers. I'd talk about deployment schedules, and that stupid bug that only appears in production. He called me his steady one, like I was some kind of anchor. 2 years in, he proposed at another wedding, a full-circle moment he thought was romantic. And I thought was on brand. A ring, a down-on-one-knee speech, a future he painted in broad, confident strokes. For a while, I let myself believe that was exactly what we were building. Then one night, a few months after we got engaged, he came over for dinner with a different kind of energy. Restless, distracted. My kitchen table was set. Pasta salad, a bottle of red we both liked. My laptop sat closed on the counter for once. He barely touched his food. "You're quiet," I said, watching him push a piece of garlic bread around his plate. "That's illegal in 3 states. He gave a short laugh, then exhaled. "I need to talk to you about something. Serious, but not bad, just important." There it was, that subtle tightening in my chest that appeared whenever someone said, "We need to talk." I set my fork down and tried to keep my voice light. "Okay, what's up?" He took a breath, bracing. "I've been thinking a lot about marriage and money, and what happens if things don't work out. There's something about hearing the phrase, 'if things don't work out,' from the man who just asked you to spend your life with him that feels like someone tilted the floor under your chair." "All right," I said slowly. "Go on." "I want us to get a prenup," he said, "before we get married. I want legal protection for everything I earn and everything I have. I don't want to lose a cent if we end up divorcing." The way he emphasized "I" and my landed like little pins along my spine. "So you're planning for divorce before we're even married?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I'm being realistic," he said, almost defensive. "I've worked hard for what I've built. I've seen what happens when people split and the courts get involved. It's ugly. I don't want that. I want a prenup that keeps everything separate. What's mine stays mine. What's yours stays yours." I watched him carefully. The earnestness, the fear, the way he said, "What's yours stays yours," like it was a concession, not a parallel. "So," I said quietly, "you don't trust me." It's not about trust, he insisted. It's about protection, smart financial planning. If nothing goes wrong, great. The prenup just sits in a drawer. If something does go wrong, we're both protected. And if I say no, I asked. He hesitated, just a beat too long. Then I can't marry you, Elena, he said. This is non-negotiable for me. I need this protection. 10 seconds. That's about how long I thought about it. 10 seconds where I mentally pulled up my spreadsheet the way I always do when I feel a decision heavy enough to dent my life. Rows for my salary, my modest savings, the quiet columns tracking revenue from my SaaS platform. The prenup he wanted would keep his money his. It would also keep my money mine. Okay, I said finally. Sign whatever you want. His head snapped up. Really, if you need a prenup to feel secure, we'll do a prenup, I said. You want everything kept separate? Fine. Your money is yours. My money is mine. Whatever makes you comfortable. Relief washed over his face so quickly, it almost stung. Thank you, he said, reaching for my hand across the table. Seriously, I know some people get weird about this stuff, but I need to protect myself. I get it, I said. Have your lawyer draft something. I'll have mine review it. He smiled, stood up, and wrapped his arms around me from behind, pressing his chin to my shoulder. You're amazing, he murmured into my neck. I knew you'd understand. What he didn't realize was that I understood more than he thought. A week later, the draft prenup arrived via email from his attorney, Patricia. 20 pages of legal language that boiled down to all premarital assets stay separate. All income earned during the marriage stays separate. No alimony, no claims on each other's retirement or investments. A joint account for shared expenses if we wanted, but otherwise 2 lives parallel, never merging. I forwarded it to my lawyer Tom, the same one who handled my business contracts. He called me the next afternoon. So, he said your fiancé wants what I'd call a very thorough separation of finances. That's one way to put it, I said. You okay with this? He asked. Completely. I replied on one condition. Name it. I want a clause about business assets. I said, any business or investment vehicle owned before the marriage or started during the marriage remains the sole property of the person who created it, including all income and equity. Something airtight. You're protecting your SaaS platform, he said. Exactly. If he wants protection, I want the same. No ambiguity. That's fair, Tom said. I could hear him typing. Anything else? Yeah, I said. Add a clause about financial disclosure. If either party misrepresents their financial situation or hides assets, the prenup becomes void. Full transparency required. There was a pause. Interesting, he said. Why that? Because if I'm going to sign something this restrictive, I want to make sure both of us are honest going in. If he's hiding anything, I want that to matter. Tom chuckled softly. You always think like an engineer, he said. Edge cases. I think like someone who reads the changelog before hitting accept, I replied. He added both clauses and sent the revised agreement back to Patricia. 2 days later, I got a text from Liam while I was in a meeting. Liam? My lawyer says your changes are fine. We can sign next week. No question mark, no? What did you add? No curiosity at all? That told me everything I needed to know about how carefully he was reading the document that would govern our entire financial life. We signed the prenup 3 weeks later in Patricia's office. Both lawyers present both of us initialing every page signing at the end. Liam looked satisfied, even a little smug. He'd gotten exactly what he wanted, complete financial protection from me. As I slid my copy into a folder, I felt a different kind of satisfaction. He thought he'd just insulated himself from risk. What he didn't realize was that I'd done the exact same thing, and I had a lot more to protect than he understood. Married life, I'd always been told, is when everything settles. The wedding rush fades, routines return, and things feel familiar again, like slipping into a pair of shoes that already fit. But nothing about the first months of my marriage felt familiar. 4 months after signing the prenup, Liam and I had our wedding. And to be fair, it was beautiful. Expensive flowers, an open bar, a string quartet during cocktail hour. It was also entirely paid for by Liam, who insisted on covering the bill not as a gift but as a statement. I want it to look good, he said. My colleagues are coming. My family's coming. I don't want anyone thinking we cut corners. I didn't argue. His money was his money. The prenup made that abundantly clear. We had about 90 guests more from his side than mine. He liked introducing me as his wife. This is Elena. Yes, the software architect I told you about. Smartest person I know. He said it with an easy grin that made people laugh, but I always caught the faint glimmer of pride behind his eyes. Sometimes I wondered if he liked the idea of me more than the reality. A smart wife sounded good in theory, like a bullet point on an internal resume. I used to brush that thought aside, but after the prenup, after the way he insisted we keep everything strictly separate, it was harder to ignore. After the honeymoon, a short trip to Colorado, instead of the Italy vacation he'd previously floated, we slipped into a routine almost identical to before. Same apartment, same chores, same grocery lists. The difference was the money. We opened a joint account strictly for shared expenses, groceries, rent, utilities. A spreadsheet tracked deposits from both sides. Liam made nearly twice my salary on paper, but insisted on splitting everything 50-50. Equal contributions to match our equal independence. He liked the phrase. He liked it a lot. Everything else, his bonus checks, my salary, his commission payouts, my SaaS revenue remained untouched, tucked away in separate accounts, just as the prenup specified. He seemed almost comforted by it, like having separate assets meant he never had to worry about losing anything. To him, it was a safety net. To me, it was a wall. Thin at first, but over time, brick by brick, it grew taller. And then 2 months after the wedding, it happened. The acquisition. It started with an email on a Tuesday morning. A tech company, larger, older, better funded, wanted to schedule a call about potential interest in strategic partnership or partial acquisition. I'd gotten messages like that before, but they were usually vague, exploratory. This one wasn't. This one was detailed, specific, serious. By Friday, my inbox contained ND, A's meeting agendas and valuation projections that made my stomach tighten. By the following week, their first offer came in. $8 million for 60%. My hands actually shook when I read the number. I'd been cautiously optimistic, maybe even hopeful in the private corners of my mind, but I'd never put a number to it, not like that. $8 million, and I'd retain 40% equity. My platform, my code, my long nights, and early mornings, someone put a price tag on it. A price that changed everything. For 2 weeks, I lived in back-to-back Zoom calls with lawyers, accountants, and acquisition consultants. I reviewed terms, negotiated finer points, signed documents that made my heart thud with every stroke of my pen. I didn't hide it from Liam. I just didn't tell him immediately. Not because I wanted to deceive him, but because I needed to process it myself. I needed to determine what it meant, how it worked, how much of it was real, and how much was just numbers on paper. And if I'm honest, I also needed to think about how he would react. I thought he'd be proud. I thought he'd be excited. I thought he'd hug me and say something like, "I knew you were brilliant." Instead, I got something else entirely. It was a Thursday night, 2 weeks after the acquisition finalized. Liam came home from work buzzing with energy. He'd closed a huge deal, hit a quarterly bonus, and wanted to celebrate. He opened a bottle of wine, reheated leftover pasta, and launched into a passionate monologue about his sales numbers. When he paused to breathe, I finally spoke. "That's amazing, babe," I said. "I'm really happy for you. I actually have something to share, too." He glanced up mid-bite. "Yeah, what's up?" "My software company got acquired." His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Your side project?" "Yeah," I said. "A tech firm bought 60% for $8 million. I still hold 40% equity." There was a pause, then another long enough for the pasta to cool on his plate. $8 million, he repeated like the words tasted foreign. "Yes. You have $8 million after taxes, it'll be around 5. I said, "But yes, approximately." His eyes widened, not in joy, not in pride, but in something much closer to alarm. "And you didn't think to tell me I'm telling you now. It closed 2 weeks ago. I've been handling the legal and tax stuff." He stared at me jaw tight. 2 weeks, Elena? You kept this from me for 2 weeks. I wasn't keeping it from you," I said calmly. I was wrapping my head around it. That's a massive financial change. Don't you think that's something your husband should know immediately? I felt something twist inside me. "You insisted on complete financial separation," I said. "You said what's yours is yours, what's mine is mine." I respected that. "This isn't the same thing," he snapped. "This changes everything, our whole financial situation." "Only if you want it to," I said. "Our prenup says everything stays separate." He froze. There it was. The moment the reality sank in. His prenup, the one he demanded, meant he had no claim to any of it. "You should have disclosed the value," he said, voice rising. You made it seem like you made $140,000 a year. I do make $140,000 a year from my day job. The business income was separate exactly as the prenup states. But you should have told me, he insisted. You misled me. You never asked, I replied. You saw me working late nights. You knew I had a business. You never cared to know what it was worth. That's not fair, he said angrily. You hid this from me. I set my fork down. No, I followed the terms you wanted. You crafted a system where we keep everything separate, and now that the numbers don't benefit you, suddenly that's a problem. He didn't answer. We finished dinner in heavy silence. Over the next week, he kept circling back to the same arguments that I'd kept him in the dark, that the prenup wasn't fair, that we needed to revisit it, that maybe his lawyer should recheck things. He said it gently at first, then sharply, then coldly. And each time I reminded him he wanted this, he built this. He insisted on the separation, but the truth became clearer with every conversation. Liam didn't want fairness. He wanted control. A month later, he came home with a folder in his hands and a stiff expression. I scheduled a meeting with Patricia, he said. We're going to review the prenup. There might be grounds to modify it. I closed my laptop. On what grounds? Financial disclosure, he said. You didn't properly disclose the value of your business. I breathed in slowly, calmly. All right, I said, let's meet. But inside, I knew exactly what was coming. Because the clauses I added, the ones he didn't bother to read, weren't just ink on paper. They were protections. For me. From him. He wanted a prenup to protect himself from the possibility that I might someday take what was his. He never imagined he might be the one trying to take what was mine. 2 weeks later, we walked into Patricia's law office for the prenup meeting Liam had arranged. I arrived with my lawyer, Tom. Liam arrived alone. He'd come directly from work, still in his crisp dress shirt and company badge. He didn't look confident. He didn't look angry. He looked determined, the way someone does right before they bet everything on one final desperate gamble. We sat across from each other at a long mahogany conference table. There were papers everywhere, copies of the prenup highlighted sections, little sticky tabs marking the places Patricia planned to attack. Patricia entered with a professional smile, closing the glass door gently behind her. Thank you for coming, she began, taking her seat at the head of the table. We're here to evaluate potential concerns regarding the prenuptial agreement between my client, Liam Cartwright, and his wife, Elena. Her tone was polite but firm. Tom leaned back, arms loosely crossed. Of course it can be, of course, he said. We're here to listen. Patricia folded her hands. Our position is that the prenup may be invalid due to inadequate financial disclosure from Mrs. Cartwright prior to signing. Specifically, she tapped the document, her failure to disclose the true value of her business. Liam straightened like he had been waiting for that line. I didn't flinch. Tom, with the calm of a man who had seen this exact movie 1,000 times, opened his own copy of the prenup. With respect, he said that argument is factually incorrect. Patricia lifted a brow. How? How so? Tom tapped page 8. The prenup explicitly lists my client's ownership of a software company in the asset disclosure section. Patricia's eyes flicked down. I watched her expression shift almost microscopically. Yes, she said slowly, but it doesn't specify valuation. Because valuation was not required, Tom replied evenly. At the time of signing, the business was valued based on approximately $400,000 in annual revenue. Roughly $2 million at a standard 5 times multiplier. And that revenue was listed in her separate property documentation. Patricia flipped through several pages. Liam glanced between us, his forehead tightening. The business has since grown, Tom continued. The acquisition, which occurred after the prenup was signed, is irrelevant to whether the contract was valid at the time of execution. Patricia paused. Liam opened his mouth. But she hid. Tom spoke over him gently but firmly. Nothing was hidden. She disclosed asset ownership and revenue. Your client simply didn't ask for details. That is not misrepresentation. Liam's jaw clenched. Patricia shifted gears. Well, she said we also have concerns regarding the clause Mrs. Cartwright inserted about financial disclosure, clause 16. She turned to it. It states that if either party hides assets or misrepresents their financial situation, the prenup becomes void. Yes, Tom said. My client insisted on that clause, and its existence is precisely why I advised we attend this meeting. And why is that? Patricia asked. Tom slid a manila folder across the table. The sound was soft but final, like a gavel falling. Because of him, he said calmly in preparing for this meeting, I performed routine due diligence. Liam's face drained a shade. Patricia hesitated before opening the folder. Inside were bank statements, investment account summaries, a will, a probate settlement. Tom spoke with professional gentleness, merciful almost, but the words were a blade. Liam, he said, turning to my husband, did you disclose the $300,000 inheritance you received from your grandfather? The room went still, completely, utterly still. Patricia's head snapped toward Liam. You received an inheritance? Liam swallowed. It was years ago before I met Elena. It wasn't relevant, and it wasn't. Patricia's voice sharpened. Was it listed in the prenup disclosure? Liam's lips parted, closed, parted again. No? Tom nodded once. Then under Clause 16, your client's clause. Patricia, the prenup becomes void due to his financial misrepresentation. Liam's eyes widened. Wait, no! Wait, hang on. Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. Liam, why didn't you tell me about this? It wasn't a big deal, he said, voice cracking. It's in an investment account. I hardly even... It's not who I am. It's not like Elena needs. This isn't about need, Patricia snapped. It's about legality. Tom continued calm as ever. If the prenup is voided, then all marital assets become community property, which would include, he flipped a page, Mrs. Cartwright's post-tax acquisition proceeds of approximately $5 million. A beat passed. Patricia relieved to find any foothold added quickly, and Mr. Cartwright's salary bonuses and inheritance would also be marital assets. Tom nodded. Correct. Both sides would be subject to equal division. But Patricia hesitated. Her voice lowered. The numbers don't favor your client. Liam looked at her sharply. What does that mean? Patricia inhaled deeply. It means, Liam, if the prenup is voided, Elena would owe you half of what she earned during the marriage, and you would owe her half of everything you earned and inherited. The math landed in this room like a bomb. My $5 million versus his $300,000 inheritance and his salary. He would lose far, far more than he would gain. Silence filled the room, thick, heavy, irreversible. Finally, Patricia spoke with quiet resignation. I need to speak with my client privately. Tom and I stepped outside into the hallway. Liam refused to look at me as we passed. We waited 20 minutes in a quiet lobby, soft music playing overhead, the receptionist pretending not to listen. When we were called back in, Patricia's face was stiff. Liam's was pale. She cleared her throat. My client withdraws his request to modify the prenuptial agreement. He acknowledges that the contract is valid as written. Excellent, Tom said with a polite smile. For the record, my client has no intention of pursuing the financial disclosure issue. As long as the prenup remains unchallenged, we're satisfied. We gathered our things. Liam didn't meet my eyes. I left the room first, not out of anger, not out of triumph, but because I suddenly needed air, cold, clean, uninterrupted air. In the parking lot, Liam finally caught up to me. You knew, he said, voice strained. You knew about the inheritance. I turned slowly. Yes, I said I did. You could have told me. And you could have read the contract you insisted on, I replied. You built a system to protect yourself from me. I made sure I had the same protection. That's not the same thing. It is, I said softly, exactly the same. He stared at me, breathing hard. You played me, he said. No, I said I gave you exactly what you asked for. I got in my car and shut the door. Through the windshield, I could still see him standing there, small, stunned, and realizing too late that the armor he'd built had surrounded me instead, and left him exposed. The drive home was quiet, not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that feels like unfinished arguments pressing against the windows. Liam drove ahead of me, and for a long stretch of the highway, I could see his taillights through my windshield, steady, unblinking, like he was following a lane he no longer trusted. When I stepped inside our apartment, he was already there, sitting on the far end of the couch. His jacket was still on his tie, discarded beside him, his hands clasped together like he wasn't sure what to do with them now. He looked up the moment I entered. You should have told me, he said. No hello, no softening, just the accusation raw and sharp. You should have disclosed your inheritance, I replied, setting my keys down. But you didn't, and I didn't call you a liar. He winced. That's not fair. It's perfectly fair, I said. You demanded complete financial separation. You insisted on protecting yourself from what I might someday take from you. So yes, I protected myself too. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But you kept it as leverage. I shook my head. No, I kept it as protection just like you did. He didn't respond. Silence stretched between us again, long enough for me to hear the hum of the refrigerator, the faint clicking of a vent somewhere in the hallway. Finally, he whispered, I didn't think you'd have more to protect than I did. There it was. Not admiration, not pride, not relief that his wife was financially secure, just disappointment that he'd miscalculated. You assumed you'd always earn more, I said quietly. You assumed you would always be the one at risk. You never stopped to consider that maybe I wasn't the liability you thought I was. His head dropped. That's not what Isn't it? I asked. You pushed for a prenup because you were afraid of losing what you had, and now that I have more, you want to renegotiate the rules because they don't work in your favor. His shoulders slumped. I sat on the opposite end of the couch, leaving space between us. Space that felt like a physical measurement of everything we'd lost in the past few months. When we got married, I said I thought we were building something together. I thought we were partners. But you signed that prenup because you didn't trust me. That's not true. It is, I said softly. And today in that conference room when you tried to challenge the prenup to access my money, that told me everything. He rubbed his face, overwhelmed and exhausted. We didn't talk much of that night. We didn't touch. We didn't sit close. We went to bed as two people who shared a mattress, not a marriage. And in the morning, nothing was different. The weeks that followed were strange. On the surface, everything looked normal. We woke up, went to work, texted about groceries, took turns doing dishes. We split every expense down the middle like we always had. But underneath something had cracked, and both of us could feel the air seeping out slowly. He was quieter. He hovered more. He asked questions he never asked before. How's your business doing? Are you taking a salary now? What are you planning to do with the equity you kept? They weren't questions born of curiosity. They were questions born of calculation. Every time he asked, I felt a piece of something inside me detach and drift away. 3 months after the prenup meeting, we were in what I could only describe as emotional purgatory. Married technically, living together technically, functionally, we were financial roommates. One night, Liam knocked on the doorframe of my home office while I was updating my budget spreadsheet. I didn't look up right away. The screen reflected in his eyes. We should go to counseling, he said suddenly. I blinked. Counseling for trust issues, he clarified. I stared at him for a long moment, then closed my laptop. Whose trust? I asked softly. He hesitated. Both of ours. Liam? I said, choosing each word with care. I didn't hide anything from you after we signed the prenup. You knew I had a business. You chose not to ask what it was worth. You chose not to read the changes I added. You chose to hide your inheritance. He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. I respected the boundaries you wanted. I honored the separation you insisted on. I didn't ask for your money. I didn't ask for access. I didn't ask for leverage. I followed the rules exactly as you wrote them. He swallowed. And now, I said, voice softer. You're angry that the rules protect me, too. His eyes dropped to the floor. We didn't fight. We didn't yell. There was no dramatic scene, just a quiet truth sitting between us, undeniable and immovable. He finally whispered, So where do we go from here? I leaned back in my chair. That's up to you. The prenup stands. Our finances stay separate. If you want to stay married, we stay married. If you want a divorce, we divorce. He looked up, startled. That's it. What else is there to say? I asked. You insisted on a marriage built on financial autonomy. We have that completely. He didn't answer. He walked away, and I sat there staring at the blank spreadsheet next to my budget tab, the one labeled Future Plans, wondering when exactly our marriage stopped being a partnership and started being a ledger. People like to say the end of a relationship is marked by a big fight, a betrayal, a confession. But sometimes the end comes quietly. A shift in tone, a misstep, a realization you can't unhear. For me, it was this. When Liam looked at my success, he didn't see a win for us. He saw a loss for himself. That more than the prenup, more than the inheritance, more than the meeting at Patricia's office, that was the moment everything changed. And deep down, I know we're drifting toward a point where staying together or walking away won't be a dramatic choice. It'll just be the natural conclusion to a truth we're both afraid to say out loud. He married me because he wanted protection. I married him because I believed in partnership. And now, all we have left is the prenup, the one he built to keep himself safe, the one that ended up protecting me instead. 3 months passed after the prenup meeting, and our lives settled into a strange rhythm, quiet, controlled, almost eerily polite. We weren't fighting. We weren't reconnecting. We weren't doing anything, really. We were two people orbiting the same kitchen island, the same bed, the same calendar of chores, careful not to collide. It felt like we were living inside a marriage-shaped bubble, where nothing grew and nothing broke outright. It all just thinned slowly, stretching toward inevitable rupture. Liam was trying in his own way. I could see that. He started making dinner more often. He bought flowers once a week. He initiated small talk, asking about my work, my plans, the upcoming product update for the SaaS platform. But every question had the same undertone, like he was trying to read a map he'd only realized existed too late. Every conversation felt like, what does this mean for me? Where do I fit into this now? What do I get out of this? Not aloud, never aloud, but in the pauses, in the tension in his jaw, in the way his eyes flicked to my laptop screen whenever I typed in numbers. The love was still there, I think, but something essential had eroded under the surface. One evening, he came home from work and hovered in the doorway of the kitchen while I cooked. His voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Can I ask you something?" I stirred the pan. "Sure." "Are you planning anything?" he asked slowly. "Like long-term?" I turned off the stove. "What do you mean, you've been distant?" he said. "Not angry, just somewhere else. I feel like I'm always a few steps behind you trying to catch up." I leaned against the counter. "Do you want the honest answer?" He nodded. "I'm trying to figure out," I said gently, "whether we're married because we chose each other or because we signed a piece of paper." He flinched but didn't deny it. "You're thinking about divorce," he whispered. "I'm thinking about what a marriage should feel like," I corrected. "And right now we're not living that." He sank into a chair. "I don't want to divorce you. I know I said, but why?" He looked up sharply. "What kind of question is that?" "An important one," I said softly. "Do you want me, or do you want the marriage, the stability, the image, the idea of a partnership where you never have to explain your choices?" His mouth opened, closed, opened again. He didn't have an answer, and the silence between us felt like truth. The next day, he suggested we go to counseling. I agreed. I wasn't against trying. But therapy doesn't work when one person wants clarity and the other wants reassurance. In the first session, the therapist asked us a question. "How do you define trust in a relationship?" Liam answered immediately. "Trust is knowing the other person won't hurt you." I waited. When he didn't elaborate, the therapist nodded and turned to me. "And for you, Elena?" I looked at my husband, hands clasped, shoulders tense, and said, "Trust is knowing the other person won't protect themselves from you." The therapist's pen paused mid-stroke. Liam's face drained because for the first time, he understood the entire problem laid bare. He had never trusted me. Not from the beginning. Not even when he loved me, especially when he loved me. He trusted me to be good. He trusted me to be steady. He trusted me to stay. But he never trusted me with his security. And now that mine surpassed his, he didn't know how to love me without resenting the imbalance. When we got home from the session, he went straight to the balcony and stood there for a long time, watching cars drift by under the streetlights. I stepped out quietly and leaned on the railing beside him. After a long silence, he said, "I wasn't trying to protect myself from you." I nodded. "But you were." He swallowed. "I thought that's what responsible people do." "Maybe it is," I said. "But partnership is different. Partnership requires a kind of vulnerability that you never gave me." "And you think it's too late?" he asked. I hesitated. For the longest time, I believed the answer had to be yes or no, but the truth was messier. "I think we're standing in two different marriages," I said finally. "Yours is about protection. Mine was about trust. I don't know how to merge those." His breath shuddered. "Do you want to leave?" I exhaled slowly. "I don't want to leave," I said honestly. "But I can't stay in a marriage built on fear, and I can't rebuild alone." He nodded, eyes glassy. "I don't know how to fix this. I know." I said, "That's why we're here." We stood together at quiet, both looking at a city that kept moving, while our marriage stood painfully still. Not broken, not whole. Just waiting. It's been another month. We're still in counseling. We're still trying in a quiet, tentative way. Some days feel like progress. Some days feel like regression. He's learning how to communicate without defensiveness. I'm learning how to communicate without retreating. It's not simple. It's not pretty. It's not guaranteed. But for the first time, we're having conversations we should have had years ago, before the prenup, before the engagement, before the assumptions on both sides hardened into fractures. And maybe that's the real ending. Not dramatic, not explosive, not triumphant, but honest. We're not healed. We're not destroyed. We're not finished. We're standing at the threshold of something that could fall apart or finally grow into what we both pretended it was at the beginning. A partnership. Only this time without the blind spots, without the assumptions, without the silent calculations. And if we can co-create that version, if we can actually meet each other in the middle, maybe we'll make it. And if not, then the prenup makes the ending clean. No more, no less, exactly what we each earned. Just like he wanted, just like I agreed to, just like we both signed for.